This is the Practical Homeopathy Podcast, episode number 122.
Hi, this is Joette Calabrese. My Practical Homeopathy is transforming lives all over the globe by offering health freedom. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I say a podcast is priceless. I want you to hear in their own words how regular people just like you have reshaped their lives using the practical protocols I teach in my Practical Homeopathy. So, with the help of my reporter, Kate, I bring you this podcast series featuring interviews with moms, dads, teens, healthcare practitioners, and Academy of Practical Homeopathy students from all walks of life. With education, you can follow in these students' footsteps. You can eliminate your fear of illness and injury by learning how to care for yourself and your family. Like them, you can be in control without acquiescing to authority to live healthier, more autonomous lives. Indeed, you too can heal yourself and your family through my brand of homeopathy, Practical Homeopathy.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Kate, and today I want to welcome a couple studying homeopathy together. Yes, you heard me right. It's a couple, and they have some inspiring stories to share with us about how homeopathy has been, in their words, amazing, eye-opening, and saved them thousands of dollars each year. So I want to welcome Chris and Gary to the podcast. Hi.
Hi, Kate. Glad to be here today.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, let's get started, Gary. I know you wanted to share a little bit of a background about who you guys are, where you live. So let's get started with that.
So we've been married for 44 years, and we have 2 grown children who are gainfully employed. Unfortunately, no spouses, no grandkids, but we have granddogs and grandcats. So we're blessed. Chris was born and raised in Iowa. I was born and raised in Kansas. Her background, her father was a pharmacist, and her sister and brother-in-law were nurses. Her mom worked in administration in the hospital. After high school, she went to school to become a medical assistant.
To work my way through school while I got my physician assistant degree.
We met when she came down to Kansas because in the 70s, out-of-state tuition in Kansas was cheaper than in-state tuition in Iowa. I'm a retired engineer. Chris is a retired PA, physician's assistant. When she started taking homeopathy about 2 years ago, my background is in physical sciences, so I've taken chemistry, physics, that kind of stuff. When she started talking about potentization, it blew my mind because my chemistry was always if you diluted something, it weakened it. And so let's just say I was highly skeptical of the whole thing.
You're very analytical, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so Chris, you have this analytical, skeptical husband. And I'm sure from your background too, you really had to think about this closely. But why don't you give me, from your take, how did your journey to homeopathy look?
Okay, a little over 10 years ago, our nieces were researching alternative medicines and treatments for their father who had multiple sclerosis. So then essential oils came into all of our lives, and we saw it do miraculous things for all of our health. And it even helped heal some skin cancers in her father-in-law. Then one of the nieces joined what I call a crunchy Facebook group. She lived in a very large metropolitan area, and these people were women always searching for the safest product and the best product for their families. And their researching skills were just unbelievably superb. And through that, I found out about homeopathy. And one of the people in that crunchy group was Dr. Christy Corder, who is now a graduate of Joette's Academy and Mastery. And I took my first 2 Gateway 1 and 2 courses with her. And that was back in 22. And since then, I have taken 5 other Protocol courses, I have bought just about all of them. And so it's just a matter of time until I can go through the next 3 that haven't been opened up or really used yet.
So where was Gary when you were doing all of this? Was he involved in studying, or were you doing this on your own?
I was studying on my own and then with one of my nieces. She did not pursue more courses because of her life thing right now. But as they had emergencies or we had emergencies, we would consult each other and we would work through things together. It's amazing what a foundation that Gateway 1 and Gateway 2 give you, and learning about the cell salts also. They're just amazing healing remedies, without a doubt. To this day, we still do that. And some of the success stories come from our family escapades and our pets.
While she was doing all the studying, I was pretty much sitting on the couch watching my sports stuff. So I am supportive of her, continuing her learning. It's great that she wants to do this. But like I say, I really didn't have a lot that I wanted to do with homeopathy. It was kind of interesting that we're in a small group and one of our members has a lot of allergies. And Chris was always telling him,
there's homeopathy for that.
Homeopathy for
Didn't
that.
push anything more, but just left it at that, And after a year and a half of that, he started talking to me seriously about it. And then he had a health scare. And so really got into homeopathy and sought out homeopathic advice also. That has been a great learning experience for all of us as he's gone through his journey.
When our friend had a prostate biopsy, Chris was volunteering, called me up at home and said, you need to get over to our friend's house and make sure that he has these remedies. He was on a pain scale of 10. He was at or above 10 after this prostate biopsy. That was 2 years ago when the Purdue Pharma was a big thing and doctors would not prescribe opioids at all. They sent him home and said, take some Tylenol. So we had talked to our friend and he had started purchasing remedies. So when I went over, I made sure that he had arnica and hypericum and was taking those. And he, within 45 minutes, his pain level was back down to a 3 or a 4. And it was after that that he started doing research. He found Bob Dunbar and his No Girls Allowed Gateway 1, Gateway 2.
No girls allowed. Yeah. So
And
Bob, for those of you listening who don't know, Bob leads some all-men study groups.
our friend took Gateway 1 and 2 from Bob. So then we would go to small group and he would sit with Chris and they would talk over remedies and protocols and how he could further do things to get rid of his allergy problems. And after several months of that, it was kind of like, maybe I ought to start taking some of this stuff just so I understand what's going on. And so our friend hooked me up with Bob, and I've been through Gateway 1 and 2 with Bob now twice. So that's where I got into it. One of the great things about having purchased all of the protocol courses is we found out that as Chris's spouse, I could also take those courses. And then Chris decided to retake the survivalist course. Joette recommends taking the protocol courses 3 or 4 times in order to get all of the benefit out of those. So I decided it was time for me to go ahead and jump in and start learning. And so we have been studying together since.
And how long has that been?
We started in, the survivalist was March.
Yeah, for this year. Yeah.
Okay.
So
that takes 2 months to go through.
And we're in the middle of, almost the end of detox right now. And so I'm looking forward to many more.
Yes. You have a lot to do to catch up to Chris.
I do.
Well, I bet this has been really interesting doing this together. When we were talking earlier, you said that it's really brought a new aspect to your marriage. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The story I shared is that we went down to visit a niece, had about a 6-hour, 8-hour drive, and I was in the middle of my Gateway course. And so I was trying to study for that. But when I was driving, Chris would read to me the course material, or when she was driving, I would go ahead and read it, and then she would quiz me. What would you give in this case? What strength? How often? So it was a good learning experience, and it's a good way to learn.
And it makes a long car trip go faster.
I bet. That's great. All right. I think it's time to hear some of your success stories, because what you shared with me is really amazing. Some of the things that you guys have been able to do with homeopathy. So why don't you give us a sample of some of the things that you've seen as you've used homeopathy?
In my very first Gateway course, one of the families had their 2.5-year-old get a broken leg just below the growth plate, below the knee, and it went crosswise. So they had to be non-weight bearing the first 2 weeks. The mom was studying. This was her first time in Gateway 1 also. And so she gave Symphytum from that first day. When they went back for the 2-week checkup, the doctor said things looked good, and she asked if they could do an x-ray just to see how well things had healed, because of the non-weight bearing, and holding a toddler down is not very easy to do. The x-ray showed the fracture was totally healed. It didn't show any bony callus, which you usually see in the process of a fracture. Everything was healed like it hadn't happened. And she shared the pictures that she took of those x-rays. It was just mind-blowing for me, as being a physician assistant and having helped people with fractures and stuff in the past. So that was our first real big example of how much it can do. Another one was a family member was sledding on an icy conditions and took a bad hit to the head. And where they were sledding, they were 25 minutes from an emergency room on good roads, but they were totally iced in. But they had homeopathy. They gave arnica within that first 2 minutes after the injury. Our friend was 8 years old at the time, but he already knew how to rank pain. And so he said it was an 8 out of a 10. And mom noticed that his pupils were not reacting to light to constrict and dilate as they should. So she continued giving the arnica frequently. At the 30-minute mark, the pain was down to a 3. And 45 minutes later, the pupils were now reactive to light as they should be. And in 3 hours, the goose egg from where he hit couldn't be felt. It didn't even have any sponginess left behind, which I had never seen anything heal like that in Western medicine. That was very measurable in first person.
I've seen that happen from people who are skiing too, and giving arnica and aconite. And oh my goodness, it is incredible.
They gave aconite too back in the beginning. You always do that when it's a shock or injury thing. So, yeah.
Yes. If my kids are ever out skiing, I'm always giving them the arnica and aconite to put in their ski jackets.
Right. Our next biggie was last October. Friend's mother-in-law called them to say, come over. I've had my AFib, which is atrial fibrillation, which means the heart is not beating correctly, had happened during the night. She didn't want to bother anybody. She had a horrible headache. And they got there, and all of a sudden her speech went garbled. So they knew she was probably having TIA or going into stroke. So they gave arnica once again, and very frequently. Got to the emergency room, having called ahead. They did a CT scan and an MRI. So they had medical proof where the TIA started. It did not progress into a stroke. And the doctors couldn't explain it, but the family could, knowing the homeopathy. But they didn't share that because a lot of medical facilities poo-poo homeopathy and don't believe it's for real. And she has since done well, and she has not had any stroke after. It's continued very well. That trip we were talking about when I was reading the Gateway 2 book, while I was driving, all of a sudden my left calf swelled and started hurting very painfully. And I'd had blood clots in a calf 20 years ago, so I knew that's probably what it was because we'd been driving so much. So I started taking arnica after I pulled over, made Gary drive. And then I had the seat reclined, so I had my foot up on the dash. And then I am doing massage therapy on my leg, which we had just visited one of my nieces who's in that school, and she had just shown me how to do it the night before. It's a God thing. It truly is. And by the time I got home, my calf was down by half. And the next morning it was normal and it did not progress or get any worse.
Wow, that's great.
And then on the protocols, I use several for my rheumatoid arthritis, macular degeneration, which is a change in my eyes. It happens on the retina. It comes from our family side. For my cataracts, for type 2 diabetes, it helps keep sugars in control, and so I don't have to be on insulin. For our pets, we have 2 dogs that are very seniors. One has extreme separation anxiety and fears of loud noises, thunderstorms, and fireworks. So we have gone through many remedies and combinations to find what keeps him comfortable and not panicked for that. And for our aging Cocker Spaniel, she has Cushing's disease, which is an adrenal problem. And so we buy a homeopathy mix that works better than what regular vet medicine did.
And you found some of these protocols on the blogs of Joette's?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, the other thing for Annabelle, she was pretty much deaf. And then from the Buster blog from his birthday about how Joette had given him arnica in his water for several conditions, which had helped his heart, a tumor to shrink, as well as his hearing came back. He'd only been able to hear high-pitched squeaks before. And with Annabelle, that was the same thing. She only heard very, very loud noises or high-pitched. Unfortunately, she's gone totally deaf since then, but we got a couple more years where she could hear us before that happened. For my cataracts, that comes also from one of Joette's blogs. Oh, and going on for the fear of fireworks noise and stuff, if you have military veterans in your family, it helps the PTSD that they have as well. It can take the edge off. Unfortunately, our town has 3 days straight of allowing fireworks, just about almost 24 hours a day. It is never a pleasant time.
Wow. Well, that blog, I think, would be helpful. And I believe it's Flynn and the Not So Fun Fireworks.
Yes. And it also had 2 other hyperlinks in it that helped you find some other things too.
Yes. And we'll put those links below for those of you listening. So if you're driving in the car, when you get to a place where you can look at the website, those links will be listed on the website right below the podcast.
The other thing for homeopathy, it helps our niece with their hobby cattle. They are just starting into having calves again this year. And one of the cows had mastitis and very engorged. And so Phytolacca, they used as a spray on the sac as well as on her nose. Within 24 hours, the calf was able to nurse on all 4 teats, which only 2 out of the 4 had been available because she was so firm. And then for eye infections, for ticks, if you have dogs that are out in the brush or in the woods with you and that sort of thing, Ledum is great for tick bites and to prevent getting Lyme disease. Also on the blogs that Joette has about Lyme disease and ticks and those kinds of bites. I think the neatest one was their family cat had been attacked by some critter at night. They're not sure what it was, but it caused damage in her abdomen. So she had to go to a vet to have surgery. And then they were fighting infection and using homeopathy. And with that, they were able to have her heal from a really bad abscess within like 7 to 10 days. That was using Bellis perennis and Staphylos aureus.
One of the things that I have found amazing is that Chris has been able to get into these different groups of people using homeopathy, like the farm group.
This is through Michelle, who is one of our leaders. And so she has signal chat groups for people who have taken her courses. And then we become like detectives or support groups, depending on if it's crisis or just a chronic problem that you can't get a good solution going. We cover 3 or 4 time zones. So there's usually somebody on if a crisis comes up, and you can get answers and they can help with research if you're someplace where you can't do that. And we do that a lot. And that has just been such a blessing also. So you have like 150 new friends.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, Gary and Chris, because that is one of the things that people say is the biggest benefits from joining a study group is that you're right. You have this now community of people that you help each other. You're a resource. You're there for each other. And so that alone, I think, is so valuable.
And if somebody needs a special remedy and that's going to be 2 to 4 days, like too late for getting it, we put it out geographically, who knows who has what, and can we get it there? And we can usually get it there in less than 2 days to whoever needs whatever.
Wonderful.
I do have one more really great success story.
Yes, please.
This was a year ago, May, and it was the farm group and the survivalist guide group that Michelle has. And it was the story of a family whose dog became deathly ill. And they aren't really sure to this day what the cause was, but it was so bad that they had 2 different vet offices say they had done everything possible. There wasn't anything they could do. The dog was suffering, and the best course would be to put her down. And the mom and one sibling were there, and they knew they had to take her home so everybody could say goodbye to Willow. And so they left against medical advice, and that vet office gave them a really bad time about it. And they got home, and so Mom, who was the homeopathy person, got on the grapevine here and put it out there. And I don't think it was 5 minutes. And we had 10 people research it, all symptoms, repertorizing, which means pretty much for us using Robin Murphy's repertory book, which you put in symptoms, and then that gets you choices of the homeopathy medicines that are best for what you're dealing with. And so this went on for 36 hours. We were tag teaming the family as they were going through this crisis. And the next day, midday, Willow was able to lift her head and take some drinks of water. This is the dog that they even called at 5 o'clock the day before saying, I'll send a vet out to put her down. You can't let her suffer like this. Monday night, she was able to stand up. By Wednesday, she was walking outside. The end of the week, she was running and being just about her same self. That is the miracle of homeopathy.
Wow.
The medications used.
What was the condition that she had?
I don't remember now what caused it. I'm thinking it was a vaccine type reaction, kind of nausea, vomiting, couldn't keep anything down, couldn't drink, totally lethargic, no energy, just laid there. And she was a big dog, like 70 to 80 pounds. We just all rejoiced with them, just seeing the turnaround. Mm-hmm. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
At the end of the week, the owner posted a video on the group showing the dogs playing in the backyard together.
Sweet.
That they wanted to put down the week before.
Wow. You've shared some really powerful stories. Thank you so much for just enlightening those who are listening to what homeopathy can do. Now, we know this takes a lot of work, and it takes a team of people. And, like you said, you guys did this together. It's hard to be isolated and do this alone. So I think you guys are a great example about what you can accomplish from joining a group and being plugged in and connected and working together. So I really appreciate you guys sharing.
Well, thank you. And this is the blessing of Gary said, whatever you want to do, I don't care what it costs. It's okay. Wow. As I'm buying on group buys to get 35% discounts on the courses, but it still is a chunk of change for a lot of people's budgets. And then building up our supply of remedies to have for just in cases. When I started all this was just after the bad California Palisades fires, and then it was the train derailments in the Ohio Valley and all of that contamination that went up from that. And so this just really was my push, I guess, to be ready just in case.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I remembered, one of the best things about being in one of the Signal chat groups or the Telegram groups like Bob has is, as a beginner, not only are you learning about the remedies, but the question is always what potency and what frequency. And so especially for beginners, to get into a group and be able to put out there, hey, I've got this going on. I think I need to use this remedy, but what potency and what frequency should I use? Usually you can get somebody that's more experienced that can give you an answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why to the protocols are helpful. So if you have a protocol, which means it does give you the remedy, the potency, and the frequency, then that's so helpful. But if you don't have that, you're right. Having others who have that experience can be very helpful. So as we wrap up today, I just want to find out if there's anything else that you guys would like to share for those people who are listening. Maybe they have just started to learn about homeopathy or have been studying for a little while. What advice or thoughts do you have for those people?
You've made a great choice. You'll never be sorry you did. It will empower you. It will save you hours in the urgent care and ERs waiting for help if you can take care of a lot of this on your own at home. If you have littles at home, if you have teething and boo-boos and that sort of thing, you will have everything at your fingertips to take care of all of that.
It's just eye-opening to learn that homeopathy is used worldwide except in the U.S. And I know that it's becoming more popular in the U.S. I can't wait to see it expand.
It's been very exciting for me to see that homeopathy products are now showing up on television commercials in the commercial break times. And it's not just late at night, it's in prime time.
Yeah, that's pretty great. I can't wait to see homeopathy spread as well. And I know that's Joette's heart, is to see homeopathy in every household. So I appreciate you guys and what you're doing and how you're sharing homeopathy and how you shared with us your stories of encouragement. So thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Kate.
These podcasts focus on students of practical homeopathy who have learned how to take care of themselves, family, friends, clients, pets, patients, and even livestock using homeopathic medicine. I hope listening to this podcast has inspired you to follow in their footsteps. But this podcast is only a start. It's critical that you learn how to use these homeopathic medicines properly. So peruse joetteslearningcenter.com to find fun study group opportunities and in-depth courses developed by subject. With the proper training, you can join the tens of thousands of students before you in developing the confidence and competence to protect the health of your family and loved ones with my brand of homeopathy, Practical Homeopathy.
You just listened to a podcast from internationally acclaimed homeopath, public speaker, and author, the founder of the Academy of Practical Homeopathy, Joette Calabrese. Joette's podcasts are available on all your favorite podcast apps. To learn more and find out if homeopathy is a good fit for your health strategy, visit practicalhomeopathy.com.